And Mike, the floor is yours.
Well, yeah, I would echo Chuck. Thanks for joining. I really appreciate it. This is a great day for Army and the American Athletic Conference. I'm here at historic Michie Stadium. We're bringing into the American a storied program, and the overwhelmingly positive response I received today, it really was remarkable, shows the great esteem in which, the Army program is held and what a great addition they'll be for our conference. I think it's going to be a tremendous experience for Army and the cadets. That it'll be a very competitive conference. Army will obviously now have a path to the CFP, chance to compete for championships. It's going to be, I think, a great mutually beneficial relationship. So we're absolutely thrilled. I want to thank, obviously, General Gilland. I want to thank Mike Buddy, the athletic director here at Army, and Jeff Monken, the Army coach. Everybody was terrific in this process. It was a lengthy process because, there were some complicated things we had to work through, but we are, I'll close by just saying again, we're just absolutely thrilled to have Army joining, and our membership is very excited about having Army start in 2024. And we get back to being a 14-team conference. Thanks, and happy, Chuck, to open it for questions.
Yep, Mike, I'll be taking questions from this end. If you like to ask a question of Commissioner Aresco, please use the raise hand feature, and we'll get to you. First question will go to Seth Mendelson.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. I'm Seth Mendelson with BlackKnightNation.com, covering Army sports. My question for you is why the I guess I want to say rush, but why the need to have Army join in 2024, having the fact that they have a lot of contracts, and is there anything that the conference is going to do to help Army get out of any of these contracts financially?
We are going to help Army in that regard. And Army has been thinking about this for a long time, and they've been doing the groundwork to deal with these games, and some of them can be rescheduled down the road. I'll leave Mike Buddy to talk about how they're going to redo the schedule. But Army was interested in joining in 24. We were certainly interested in having them in 24. SMU is leaving after this year. We did not want to play as a 13-team conference, assuming we obviously could find a team that fit, and that culturally fit, and that we felt competitively fit. And Army, you just can't do better than having West Point and having the United States Military Academy in your conference. So having them in 24, we can work through it. We'll work through it, Seth.
Okay, my follow-up question is this the end of expansion for your conference, or are you looking for any other teams to possibly join? UConn and UMass have made it clear they'd like to get into a conference.
For us at this point, it's definitely the close of any expansion discussions. You never say never to anything, but at this point, we have no interest in expanding beyond 14. We're happy at 14. When you look around, I mean, there have been schools that have expressed interest in us, but at this point, we're very happy with the membership we have, and we're a reinvented conference now, and we have to make sure we build it and get everybody, fully integrated into what we're doing. So no, we have no plans to explore any more expansion at this point.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right, next we'll go to Frank Bonner of the Daily Memphian.
My God, you were breaking up. Did you say you were going to forego the scheduling questions? Is that what you said?
No, I'm sorry, I was breaking up. I hope we can get that.
Well, it was on my end. It was on my end. It wasn't on yours.
Okay. Yeah, no, what I said was that, you would have to talk to the Army athletic director, Mike Buddy, regarding the specifics of rescheduling. That's not really up to me to comment on, but I know that Mike has been working through this, and we've had obviously, lengthy discussions about Army joining. And when the interest became, very real, Mike was looking at rescheduling games and working on whatever he had to do to make sure that they could play in the conference. Obviously, we play 8 conference games, and Army, has as Navy and Air Force, so they have obviously a couple of games they can play outside the conference. But I would defer to Mike as to how he's dealing with that particular issue.
But it's scheduling as far as the conference goes. I know last year you guys put out that 4-year conference opponent plan. With SMU leaving and Army joining, is that entire plan kind of out the window, or can you just kind of tweak what you already have?
No, to some degree it is. You don't just put Army in place of SMU because there are a lot of various factors that go into play in putting a schedule together. So you don't just slot Army in and say, okay, this is how it's going to work. And we also have a game that Army was going to play as a non-conference game that now could potentially become a conference game. And so we have some work to do. It has to be changed. It's a little more than a tweak, but within a month or so, we'll have a pretty good idea of which teams our conference teams are going to play in the conference this year.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
All right, next we'll go to Jonah Dillon of the Memphis Commercial Appeal.
Thanks, Jonah Dillon, Commercial Appeal. Hey, Mike, I'm just wondering, obviously people are interested in the Army Navy aspect of this. Were there any discussions about making that a conference game, and what did that look like?
No, from the very beginning, we knew that we had to keep Army Navy separate. That game simply is not a conference game. It's something that the two schools have, it's a special game. It's been, played obviously, for well over 100 years. And we felt that it had to stay outside, the conference. Now, doesn't mean that, those two teams couldn't play in our championship game. We won't schedule them in the regular season because again, unless they were in our championship game, we wouldn't want them playing because that Army Navy game is special. It's a unique game. And both Army and Navy wanted, to keep it separate, and we have no problem with that. We understand that it simply doesn't become a conference game simply because they're now both in the same conference.
Seth, did you have a follow-up? I see your hand is still raised.
No, I did not. I'm sorry. I'll take it down.
No problem. Once again, if you have a question for Commissioner Aresco, please use the raise hand feature and we'll be sure to call on you. Let's go next to Ralph Russo of the Associated Press.
Hey, Ralph.
Hi, Mike. Hey, listen, I'm going to apologize because I am jumping on a couple of minutes late, so I'm going to apologize in advance if I'm making you repeat yourself.
That's okay.
But I know you have approached Army before and had talks with them about joining, and they have been reluctant. I guess I'm wondering at this point, and again, I do apologize for making you repeat yourself, but what may have, was your sales pitch a little better this time, Mike, or like what was the thing that maybe dragged it over the line?
Oh, I don't think it was a sales pitch. We had some discussions quite a while ago with Army, but things change, and maybe being an independent isn't as attractive as it once was. But I think that question probably would be better directed eventually at the Army Athletic Director, Mike Buddy, and Mike and I have had a lot of conversations. All I can say is that we have had interest in Army over the years, without question, Ralph. We have, and I think again, Army had that experience in Conference USA years ago, and I can't necessarily speak to whether that had some influence on whether they would join a conference, but I think ultimately the feeling was that Army is a really great fit for our conference. We have AAU schools, we have some tremendous institutions. I think competitively it's a really good fit. And I think, the days of independence, might be waning. And so that might have been a factor. And I think sometimes it's timing. It just seemed to be the right time. And, but I think Mike is probably better. I'd rather not put words in his mouth. I think he'd be better to tell you what might have changed in Army's, position here. But we're thrilled that they've made that decision, and our membership was really excited because we felt that, Army is just such a wonderful storied program and a great national brand. There's just so many great things about them to have them in the conference. And, for us, it was really a no-brainer. Ultimately, there were a lot of complications to work through, but we're very happy with the outcome.
All right, we'll go back to Seth Mendelson.
Hi, two more questions. One, was the vote unanimous? Was there any school that did not want Army to come in?
Yeah, we had our vote last night, and we had a school, one school that couldn't make the call because you have to have everybody there, in person, and but it was unanimous for everybody on the call.
Okay, and the other question is, you said there were some complications you had to work through. Can you fill us in on any of that?
Well, again, without getting into a lot of detail, we obviously, originally were working through the fact that Army has a deal, with CBS Sports Network, currently, and we had to figure out how that's going to work. There were some other things, we have a lot of new members that we brought in, so we had to work out various, financial matters and things of that nature. But it was all a very smooth process, very reasonable on everyone's side. And also, at this point, we talked a little bit about, Army Navy and how that would work potentially if they got to the championship game. We talked about scheduling on there. We will protect the Air Force Army date. There were some other things that also we had to work through, but nothing that we ultimately couldn't overcome. And I think the proof of that is that we ultimately reached, the outcome where Army will enter the conference next year.
I'm sorry, one more question. Is Army going to be a full member financially of the football conference? Will they get the same benefits?
Army is, I can't get into the finances, but Army is going to be a football only member, but they will have full voting rights in our conference. A football member in our conference, we have obviously Army and Navy are full football members. They have voting rights in our conference.
Will they get financially? Will they get the same money that Navy gets, for example?
I can't speak to that. I wouldn't get into the financials, but everybody's happy with what we worked out.
Okay, thank you.
No, thanks. You're welcome.
Again, if you have a question for Commissioner Aresco, please use the raise hand feature and we'll call on you. Next, we'll go to Ross Dellinger.
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Ross, how are you?
I'm good. I want to ask you more of a kind of a big picture question on when it comes to like independence. And you mentioned it there, the independent schools, and how maybe that was part of this. Is it's getting harder to be a independent. Can you speak more about that? Just in general, what you see from the national landscape, and maybe how much more difficult it is right now to be an independent?
I think it is getting harder, Ross, because many conferences have gone to 9-game conference schedules. There's even talk that some could go to a 10-game conference schedule. And so that obviously eliminates some opportunities to play, if you're an independent, to play games. In addition, financially, it potentially becomes a little more of a burden. There's also, teams set up their schedules well in advance, and often you just can't find dates that work. And especially, in November when a lot of teams are obviously playing their conference schedule pretty much exclusively, it's hard to find the kind of games you want in November. Sometimes you might have to play more FCS games than you really want to when you have to schedule independently. So I think all those things, Ross, are factors now, and it's probably become more acute in part because, again, conferences are playing more games within their conferences, and there are fewer games available. And there's some other, some of the other things I mentioned also, I think, factor into it.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go back to Frank Bonner from the Daily Memphian.
Like, I know you said Army is coming football only. Was there ever any conversation about bringing them in as not just football only, but as a full sport member?
No, we had no conversations in that area because they've been very happy in the Patriot League, and they have no interest in having their other sports play, in our conference. If they did at any point, we would certainly consider that. But I think they're very happy with where their basketball and Olympic sports are now, and we had no discussions. It was strictly a football only membership.
We'll go back to Seth Mendelson.
I'm sorry, one more question. You mentioned that other conferences are going to 9 and possibly 10 games schedules, league schedules. Is the AAC committed to an 8-game schedule for the future?
We are, and for a couple of reasons. One, we feel we need to play 4 non-conference games because that gives us a chance to play, the so-called P5 games. You know how I feel about the P5, G5 nomenclature, but we'll use it here for illustrative purposes. You have to in our conference, we have to maintain a certain strength of schedule to be, consistently considered for a New Year's spot. And in the future, it's now going to be a playoff spot. So it's really important for us to play 4 non-conference games, and we can generally play a couple of P5. We can then play potentially a tough G5 game, and then maybe a game that isn't quite the same. So it rounds out our schedules pretty well. I think for our conference, 8 games makes a lot of sense. 8 conference games. I mean, could we think about something different in the future? I think in terms of TV, I think ESPN's been happy with how we schedule, and the fact that we do play some high-profile non-conference games is attractive to television as well. So I think there's good reason for us to stick with what we have right now.
How many bowl tie-ins do you guys have?
We have 7 plus the 8th if we make New Year's Day. And, my understanding is if Army had a tie-in, it could be included in ours, but we have to, work through that. But that's at least my initial understanding. But right now we have 7.
Thank you.
Ross, did you have a follow-up? I see your hand is still raised. If not,
Oop, I lowered it. I'm sorry.
no, all good. Just we'll go one more last call for questions for Commissioner Aresco. A reminder that yes, from Heather Dinich with ESPN.
Yeah, I realize a lot of schools are making this move for stability and financial reasons, but how much of this is also about just positioning for a 12-team playoff with leagues that are going to be guaranteed a spot?
Well, Heather, well, first of all, great to see you, Heather. I think it's definitely important. I think to have a shot at the playoff, to have a clear path to the playoff is important. I think also the idea of winning a conference championship is attractive, and our conference is a great conference, and winning our championship means something. It's meant something over the years. I think that's a factor also. And, I think again, in conference play these days, you also have a certainty of schedule. You have a lot of security in terms of how you schedule as well. But clearly having the path to the playoff and winning a championship, and if in our conference, if you win our championship, you've got a pretty good shot. And I think that's a factor. I don't know if it's the main factor. I think there are others, obviously, and but that's definitely one, Heather.
Any final questions for Commissioner Aresco? Yes, Matthew Bartlett.
Hey, Mike, Matthew Bartlett with the Roost. You touched on it a little bit earlier, but Rice and Army currently have a non-conference game at the moment. Kind of what possibilities are in play for that game as far as whether or not it'll be moved or it'll count as a conference game or anything to that nature?
It's possible that could become a conference game. Our football associate commissioner, Jamie Hickson's working on that, and it's possible that would become a conference game. It's not an absolute certainty yet, but I think it's quite possible. And, Army has played some of our teams over the years. They've had good experiences playing Tulane and Rice and others. And I think they're really looking forward to having those games ultimately down the road become conference games.
Next, go to Wes Pruitt.
Hey, Commissioner. When you look at the top of the conference right now, you got Tulane, SMU, others, and then also Memphis. Talk about those 4 teams and just how you feel about them being the face of the conference.
Well, right now, our best teams right now are Tulane and Memphis. UTSA's come on since Frank Harris has returned, and SMU is very strong. And as you know, SMU will be leaving next year. But we've got top to bottom schools that are making the commitment. This conference, when you look back at our our origins back in 2013-14, we quickly had teams that were not as competitive become very competitive, like Matt Rule's Temple team, and Tom Herman taking over at Houston and making them competitive immediately. And I think you're going to see that with a lot of our teams. And I think this is going to be a great competition for Army. I think Army will be extremely competitive in our conference. And I just believe that ultimately this conference has always had good balance. If you look at the past 10 years, we've had numerous teams not only compete for New Year's Day, but actually play on New Year's Day. It wasn't always the same teams, and it wasn't always the same teams that won. This year, we're probably a little more top heavy than we've been, but I predict that, within a year, we'll be, top to bottom, pretty much like we were. And, but those are our four best teams right now. And I think they're all, worthy of a New Year's Day slot, especially at this point. Right now, Tulane and Memphis have one loss, and Tulane played Ole Miss, as you know. Strength of schedule should matter, and Memphis played Missouri, which is a top team, as you know, and they played them in St. Louis and played them almost dead even, and then beat Boise and lost a very close game to Tulane. That's their only loss. So these are two really good teams that should compete for a New Year's Day slot.
Further questions for Commissioner? If not, yes, Seth, last one.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Commissioner, thank you very much for your time. Chuck Sullivan will be sending out a recording of this Zoom in case you were joined late. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And thanks to all the writers and reporters who joined us. We really appreciate their interest in Army and in the conference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.